I was getting ready to leave for my son's will reading when a voice cut across the quiet street. "Daniel, don't touch that ignition!" My hand froze on the door handle of my Lincoln Continental. The shout came sharp and urgent, shattering the morning calm like glass struck by a hammer. I turned and saw my neighbor, Margaret Doyle, sprinting across her lawn. She was still in her robe and slippers, white hair coming loose from its bun, her face etched with panic. Only seconds earlier, I'd been straightening my tie in the rearview mirror, trying to summon the composure to face what awaited me in Boston's financial district. Today, Patricia Reynolds would be reading Andrew's will, my son's last words to this world. The weight of my black suit pressed on my shoulders like armor I never wanted to wear. "What's wrong, Maggie?" My keys trembled slightly in my grip as I stepped back from the car. She reached my driveway, breathless, her eyes burning with urgency. "Last night around 11:20, I saw Clara by your car. She had tools, working under the hood for at least a quarter of an hour. My instincts lit up immediately. When she noticed me watching from the window, she slammed it shut and bolted." The air in the garage turned icy. Clara Mercer, my daughter-in-law, the widow who stood to inherit nearly $39 million today, if everything unfolded the way she intended. I glanced at my Continental, the same black sedan I'd driven for 8 years without fail. "You're absolutely certain it was Clara?" "Without a doubt. She parked her white Audi down the street instead of your driveway. She wanted to avoid being noticed. Daniel, I spent decades as a detective. I know when something isn't right. Don't you dare drive that thing until it's inspected." I circled the vehicle slowly. No dents, no scratches, nothing obvious. But Clara wasn't a fool. She'd spent years at Andrew's side, watching a brilliant man work with precision. She would know how to cover her tracks. Morning sunlight spilled across the garage, stirring the dust into a restless swarm. Birds chirped in the maples above our quiet Newton Street, unaware of the deadly game unfolding beneath their branches. My engineering mind whirred through the possibilities: severed brake lines, tampered steering, sabotage inside the engine block. Any one of them could turn a highway drive into a death trap. A staged accident on the way downtown would leave Clara as the sole beneficiary of my son's fortune. "Thank you, Maggie. You may have just saved my life." She gave a grim nod. "What's your next step?" I pulled out my phone with steady hands and scrolled to Erin Riley's number. If anyone could uncover hidden sabotage, it was her. 2 decades of experience in automotive work, an eye for detail sharper than most crime scene investigators. "I'm calling Erin. Professional inspection." I met Maggie's gaze. If Clara thinks she can erase the last obstacle between her and Andrew's fortune, she's about to learn how wrong she is. The phone warmed in my palm as I dialed. Whatever Clara had done to my car, I would find proof. And then I'd make sure justice was served. Not just for me, but for Andrew's memory. Erin answered on the second ring. "Riley's garage. This is Erin. It's Daniel Mercer. I need you at my house immediately. I believe my car's been sabotaged." Her voice hardened. "That's serious business, Daniel. Don't touch a thing. I'll be there in about 15 minutes with my full kit." I hung up and began pacing the garage, the polished soles of my dress shoes echoing against concrete. 15 long minutes to stare at the Continental without disturbing potential evidence. Its black paint gleamed under the dim light, deceptively innocent. How many times had I worked on it in this very spot? Changed oil, rotated tires, replaced filters. Now it might be hiding a device meant to end me. Clara's face flashed in my mind. Her dark hair perfectly styled at Andrew's funeral, tears that felt rehearsed more than real. She had absorbed Andrew's charm, but none of his decency. And to her, nearly 40 million wasn't inheritance. It was a prize worth killing for. I checked my watch. 10 minutes remained. The low rumble of an engine cut through the silence. Erin's red Ford Transit rolled into my driveway. Riley's Auto Service, reliable work, honest prices, painted across its side in bold white letters. She stepped out with her toolbox, auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, grease stains on her sleeves, her expression set with professional focus. "All right, Daniel," she said, voice firm but calm. "Tell me everything while I set up. My neighbor saw my daughter-in-law tampering with the car last night. She stands to inherit a massive fortune, and I'm the only obstacle left." Erin's jaw tightened as she activated the hydraulic lift embedded in my garage floor. "Money makes people do terrible things," Erin muttered, as the lift raised my Lincoln slowly into the air, its undercarriage exposed like a patient awaiting diagnosis. She crouched with a high-powered flashlight, her movements precise, her expression hardening as she studied the mechanics. "Someone's been here." Her voice carried a sharp, professional edge. "See this? The brake lines have been sliced with surgical neatness. No rock on the road could ever do this." I bent down, peering into the beams of her light. "How can you be certain?" "Daniel, I've been doing this for over 20 years. Natural wear phrase, it doesn't slice like this. These aren't the ragged tears of use. They're scalpel cuts, designed to fail after a few miles of driving." She traced the edges without touching them. A chill ran through me. A few miles, that would put me right on the highway toward downtown Boston, doing 70 with no way to stop. "Professional work." "Absolutely, and there's more." Erin shifted to the steering system, shining her light again. "Here, loosened tie rods. You'd have lost stability as you gained speed. Eventually, you'd have lost control completely." The picture formed with terrifying clarity. Clara didn't just wish me gone. She staged the scene for tragedy. A widower, grief-stricken, meeting his end behind the wheel. The perfect cover. I pulled out my phone. "Erin, keep documenting everything. Take photographs of every cut and loosened part. This evidence needs to reach the police first. I have a will reading to attend, and Clara expects me to die on the way there. Instead, I plan to walk into that conference room and watch her face when she realizes she failed." A taxi rolled up just as Erin finished photographing the sabotage. I stepped into the back seat, my briefcase resting on my lap, my suit now feeling like armor for battle. "Downtown Boston, State Street, Financial District," I told the driver. "Important meeting." He gave me a look in the mirror, then pulled away from the quiet neighborhood. As the streets widened into busy avenues, my thoughts churned through the full scope of Clara's plan. She had calculated every detail, the timing, the method, the illusion of an accident. Nearly $39 million was her ticket to a lifetime of luxury. Andrew had built his cybersecurity firm from the ground up, designing software that shielded massive corporations from online threats. Banks, hospitals, government contractors, his innovations protected them all. In less than 5 years, he had transformed from a struggling coder into a multimillionaire. The irony pierced me like a blade. Andrew had dedicated his life to protecting others from invisible dangers, never suspecting that the deadliest threat would come from the woman sleeping beside him. Traffic thickened as the taxi threaded into the financial district. Glass towers rose like steel giants, reflecting the morning light in fragments, 1,000 eyes watching. Delivery trucks weaved between commuters, horns blaring, engines growling. Each block carried me closer to the confrontation. Right now, Clara was likely sitting in that conference room, checking her designer watch, wondering why I hadn't appeared. In her mind, I should be twisted in wreckage on the highway, clearing her path to uncontested wealth. 39 million. The kind of fortune that makes people trade conscience for blood, I whispered to myself. But she hadn't accounted for neighborhood loyalty. Maggie Doyle's vigilance had saved my life, and Erin Riley's expertise would ensure her crime didn't remain hidden. Instead of inheritance, Clara was about to face charges of attempted murder. The taxi turned onto State Street, pulling up to a towering building of steel and glass that housed Reynolds and Associates, one of Boston's most powerful law firms. Through the windows, I watched men and women in sharp suits stride purposefully inside. Lawyers, executives, people who lived and breathed money and power. Andrew had been different. Even with his fortune, he had remained grounded, always visiting, always talking about new projects with the excitement of a boy who loved his craft. He had worked 16-hour days, not for greed, but because he believed in what he was building. Clara had never understood that. To her, money was the endgame. Lavish dinners, overseas vacations, luxury condos. When Andrew fell sick, her concern was a mask, her grief a performance. "We're here, sir," the driver said. "That'll be 42. I handed him 45 and stepped out onto the sidewalk. Before me stood the gleaming tower where Clara sat, smug in her expectation of victory. She was about to learn that Daniel Mercer was not so easily erased. As I pushed through the revolving doors, I felt Andrew's presence on my shoulder, a guiding hand from beyond. Today, justice would prevail. Andrew's legacy would be protected from the woman who had betrayed his trust and threatened his father's life. The elevator doors slid open on the 47th floor, parting like gates to a battlefield I was finally prepared to enter. Boston's financial district stretched outside the taxi like a forest of glass and steel, each tower reflecting fractured shards of the morning light. I leaned back into the worn leather seat earlier, reviewing once again the photographs I'd taken of Andrew's medical records. What I had pieced together from those documents was chilling. March 26th, first complaint of fatigue and stomach pain. April 1st, severe nausea, rapid weight loss. April 17th, gone. 3 weeks, too short a time for a healthy man to wither unless something sinister pushed him. My engineer's mind catalogued the inconsistencies. Andrew had always been meticulous about his health, regular checkups, exercise, preventative care. Yet the medical files offered nothing but evasions, unknown gastrointestinal complications. His death certificate echoed the same word twice, a blank verdict, as if medicine itself had looked away. Clara had been in control of everything. She had chosen the doctors, demanded private treatment centers, restricted visiting hours. Even I, his father, had been reduced to brief, supervised moments at his bedside. My phone buzzed with a memory I'd tried to bury. A text from Andrew during his final week. "Dad, if something happens to me, be careful with Clara." I had dismissed it as medication-induced paranoia. But now, after Erin uncovered severed brake lines in my garage, those words carried deadly weight. The taxi wound through downtown, passing familiar streets that now looked sinister through the lens of murder. Andrew's company had made him wealthy beyond measure. Contracts with banks, hospitals, government agencies. His innovations safeguarded billions in digital assets. Clara had married into that empire, but she had never valued the brilliance behind it. To her, Andrew was a machine that printed money, and when that machine began to falter, she had hastened its breakdown. The records revealed something even darker. Andrew's trusted physician had been unavailable during his decline. Clara had insisted on a substitute, a doctor with shiny credentials, but no history with Andrew. Experimental treatment, she had called it. Cutting-edge therapy for rare conditions, but instead of slowing his illness, it had accelerated it. I closed the files, staring at the looming tower ahead. Inside, Clara was waiting to collect her reward for weeks of careful poisoning, followed by a failed attempt on my life. But she had underestimated two things: the sharp eyes of Maggie Doyle and a father's determination to defend his son's memory. The cab slowed, pulling up to the law firm's entrance. My pulse thudded in my ears. Time to confront the woman who had taken Andrew from me and tried to ensure I followed. This time, I would listen to his warning. The elevator carried me skyward, each floor another step toward reckoning. Reynolds and Associates occupied prime real estate overlooking Boston Harbor. Floor-to-ceiling windows gleamed above polished marble floors, leather chairs whispering wealth and power. And there she was, Clara lounged in a burgundy armchair near the reception desk, draped in a designer dress worth a month's wages, her carefully styled hair framing a mask of elegance. She flipped through a glossy magazine, as if waiting for a flight, detached and poised. But when her eyes lifted to meet mine, the blood drained from her features. The magazine slipped from her manicured fingers and fell to the marble with a muted thud. "Hello, Clara." My voice was steady, professional, calmly surprised to see me alive. Her mouth opened and closed before any sound emerged. "Daniel, I thought you weren't coming." "Really?" "Curious." I stepped closer, watching the way her hands trembled against the chair arms. "Why would you think that? Perhaps because of what you were doing under my hood last night, around 11:20. "I don't know what you're talking about." The denial came too quickly, too sharp. Guilt always spoke first. "Maggie saw everything," I said evenly. "The tools you carried, the 15 minutes you spent bent over my engine, the way you ran when she caught you in the act." Clara stood abruptly, straightening her posture in a desperate attempt to reclaim control through height and presence. "That's absurd!" she snapped. "Why would I ever— For the same reason Andrew is gone. You saw him as a fortune, not a man." The words fell between us like a blade, slicing through the polite hum of the reception area. For the first time, her carefully constructed mask slipped, and I glimpsed the cold, calculating woman behind the widow's costume. Other clients shuffled past, their conversations forming a background murmur, a polite cover for our deadly exchange. The refined setting restrained us both. No shouting, no wild gestures, just venom delivered in low tones beneath marble ceilings and chandeliers. "You're distraught, Daniel," Clara replied smoothly, her composure returning with practiced ease. "Grief makes people imagine things that aren't there. Does grief slice brake lines? Does it loosen tie rods in the middle of the night?" Her jaw tightened. "I have no idea what you're suggesting." "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts documented by a certified mechanic with over 20 years of experience." Her eyes flicked toward the frosted glass doors leading to the conference room where Patricia Reynolds and her team waited with the will. Then back to me, calculating. Always calculating. "You know your problem, Daniel." Her voice sharpened, venom dripping from every syllable. "You never forgave that Andrew built a life with me outside your shadow. He chose me, not you. He warned me about you before he died. I should have listened." "He was delirious from medication," I said quietly. "Dying men say strange things, but they don't confuse brake lines for grief." The receptionist, sensing tension, glanced toward us, but Clara quickly forced a sympathetic smile, tilting her head just enough to play the grieving widow meeting with her concerned father-in-law. Only I could see the predator behind the mask, measuring how much damage this exchange could cause her plans. The conference room loomed behind her, the battleground where the fate of nearly $39 million would be decided. Clara thought she knew the ending. She was about to learn how wrong she was. She moved toward the panoramic windows overlooking Boston Harbor, positioning herself in the sunlight like an actress staging a scene. The golden glow framed her as if she were already victorious. "You know what, Daniel?" Her voice rang with arrogant certainty. "None of this matters. Andrew left everything to me, every cent. And you get nothing. We'll see about that." "Oh, I've already seen." Her smile sharpened into something predatory. "I was his wife. I cared for him through sickness and health, for better or worse, until death did us part." "Yes," I said, my tone like ice. "You cared for him very thoroughly." The barb slid right past her. She was drunk on anticipated wealth, blind to nuance. "I have lawyers, Daniel, the best money can buy. Contest the will if you like, but spousal inheritance rights in Massachusetts are absolute." She gestured toward the harbor, as if the view already belonged to her. "Do you see that new penthouse development along the shoreline? I've already placed a deposit on the corner unit." The casual arrogance of the revelation struck me like a blow. Andrew hadn't been buried even 3 weeks, and she was already planning her luxury purchase with his blood money. 39 million opens every locked door. Jets, jewels, the world at my feet, she continued, her voice warming to the fantasy. Finally, the life I deserve, instead of playing nursemaid to a dying man. Her words revealed the abyss where her heart should have been. No grief, no acknowledgement of a life cut short, only calculations of how best to spend her reward. Andrew worked 16-hour days to build that company, I whispered. He revolutionized digital security, protected millions of people from unseen threats. That fortune is years of sweat and sacrifice. And now it's mine. Clara's eyes gleamed with triumph. You always disapproved of me, she pressed on, her voice swelling with confidence. Thought I wasn't worthy of your precious son. Well, guess what? I win. Other clients in the reception had begun noticing, but Clara didn't care anymore. The scent of victory had made her reckless, ready to display her true nature in public. You don't even know what Andrew was really worth, I told her. 39 million, she scoffed. I know exactly what he was worth, and I have the truth. Clara laughed, a brittle, glass-shattering sound. Truth doesn't buy penthouses or European vacations. Money does, Clara whispered, stepping closer, her voice dripping with venom. And in about 10 minutes I'll have all I'll ever need. She leaned in, her tone dropping to a cutting whisper meant for me alone. Want to know a secret, Daniel? Andrew never saw you the way you imagine. He told me you suffocated him, always prying, always judging. To him, you were nothing but a bitter reminder of the past he wanted to escape. The words were crafted to wound, to fracture my spirit before the legal blow she believed was coming. But Clara miscalculated. Her cruelty didn't weaken me. It hardened my resolve. Mrs. Mercer, Mr. Mercer. The receptionist's voice broke the tension. Is ready for you in conference room A. Clara smoothed her sleek black dress, adjusted her dark hair in the window's reflection, and straightened with the confidence of someone convinced of her victory. Her high heels clacked against the marble as she walked toward the conference room like a queen heading for coronation. I followed, slower, measured. She thought she was walking into freedom and fortune. In truth, she was walking straight into ruin. Mrs. Mercer, Mr. Mercer, the receptionist said, gesturing to a heavy mahogany door with a brass nameplate that read, Patricia Reynolds, Senior Partner. Patricia's private office commanded sweeping views of Boston Harbor. Leather-bound legal volumes lined the walls, and her massive desk was stacked neatly with documents. She rose as we entered, her blonde hair cut short, her glasses glinting in the afternoon light. Please take your seats. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone who had overseen countless estate disputes. Before we begin, I'll confirm identities and review the necessary legal protocols. Clara chose the chair facing the window, seating herself so the sunlight framed her like the subject of a portrait. Her designer purse sat carefully at her side, her phone placed neatly on the table, ready to capture the moment she thought would cement her triumph. Patricia opened an official-looking folder with practiced precision. All legal requirements have been met. This document was signed, witnessed by 3 independent parties, and notarized on March 31, 2025, 2 weeks before Andrew's passing. Though physically weakened, he was mentally sharp and fully capable of making decisions regarding his estate. Clara's confident smile didn't falter. She likely assumed Andrew had made a small provision for me while leaving the vast majority to her. Patricia adjusted her glasses and began to read. I leave the entirety of my estate, nearly 39 million in assets, investments and holdings. My father, Daniel Mercer, in gratitude for his steadfast guidance and unwavering support. The words hit Clara like a hammer. Her face drained of color, and she clutched the edge of the table as if the floor had tilted beneath her. What? The word escaped her lips as a whisper. That's impossible. Patricia continued without pause, her tone professional and steady. Additionally, Andrew left a personal letter addressed to you, Mr. Mercer. She handed me a sealed envelope. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. In Andrew's handwriting, clear and deliberate, I read, Dad, be careful with Clara. I believe she may try to harm you to claim the inheritance. Trust your instincts about her true nature." My throat tightened. Andrew had known. Even as illness drained his strength, he had seen through her facade. He had protected me from beyond the grave. Clara stared at the pages as though they'd been written in code, her lips parting in disbelief. "This isn't possible. I'm his wife, his rightful heir. Spousal rights are superseded by properly executed testamentary documents," Patricia said calmly. "Massachusetts law allows estates to be distributed as the testator wishes, provided legal protocols are followed." But $39 million, Clara's voice cracked with disbelief, "goes entirely to Mr. Daniel Mercer," Patricia finished, tapping the document. "That is specified in multiple places throughout the will." I watched Clara's carefully constructed world collapse in real time. Every scheme, every calculated tear, every act of false devotion, reduced to nothing by Andrew's foresight and love. Her hands shook violently as she reached toward the documents, as if touching them might alter reality. Then shock hardened into rage. She leapt from her chair so suddenly that it toppled backward, clattering against the hardwood floor. "This is impossible," she screamed. Her voice climbed to a near shriek. "This will is a sham, a fabrication, and I'll prove it." Patricia remained seated, her poise a stark contrast to Clara's hysteria. This document was notarized and witnessed by 3 independent parties, including Andrew's longtime business associate and primary physician. "I don't care." Clara lunged across the table, manicured fingers clawing for the pages. "Give me those papers." Patricia gathered the documents with smooth efficiency, moving them out of reach. "Mrs. Mercer, compose yourself. These are certified copies. The originals are secured in our vault. The facade shattered completely. No grieving widow, no devoted spouse, no charming socialite. What remained was a desperate woman watching her grand design implode. "I'll contest this will," she spat. "You'll never see a cent of that money." She whirled toward me, eyes blazing. "I spent 3 years married to your pitiful son. I earned that inheritance." "Earned it," I said, rising slowly, my voice dangerously calm, "by poisoning him." The accusation hung in the air like a drawn blade. Clara went bloodless, then crimson with fury. "You can't prove anything. Andrew was sick. 3 weeks isn't enough to end a healthy man, unless someone helps it along." I stepped closer, watching her back toward the window. "And you knew exactly what you were giving him, didn't you?" She darted forward again and managed to snatch a single page before Patricia could stop her, tearing at it frantically. The heavy legal stock resisted, shredding in ragged strips that fluttered to the floor. "This won't change anything," Patricia said evenly, reaching for her desk phone. "As I noted, those are copies." "I want the originals," Clara screamed, flinging the torn fragments at my shoes. "I want every copy destroyed." "Security?" Patricia spoke into the receiver, voice cool. "This is Attorney Reynolds in Conference Room A. I need assistance with an unstable client." Clara spun toward the door as if to bolt, then back to the windows, trapped, feral, desperate. "You think you've won?" She jabbed a trembling finger at me. "I'll fight this for years. I'll tie up every dollar until you're dead." "Run if you like," I said, steady and controlled. "Justice has a way of catching up." 2 security officers appeared in the doorway, and the room's energy shifted at once. Patricia gestured with professional courtesy. "Please escort Mrs. Mercer from the building. She is no longer welcome in our offices." As they approached, Clara made one last wild grab, this time for Patricia's briefcase, but her designer heels betrayed her balance. She stumbled, dignity shattering like the scheme she'd built. "This fight isn't finished," she howled as the guards guided her out. "I'll see you all ruined." Silence settled, broken only by her protests fading down the corridor. Patricia adjusted her blazer and began collecting the scattered scraps. "Well," she said with considerable understatement, "that could have gone more smoothly." I sank into my chair, the enormity of what had just happened pressing down. My son had protected me from beyond the grave, and Clara's true nature had been exposed in full daylight. The war wasn't finished, but justice had claimed the first major battle. Patricia closed the door and returned to her desk, restoring order one page at a time. "My apologies for the outburst," she said, straightening a stack. "In 29 years of estate practice, I've rarely seen a reaction that volatile." "She expected to walk away with nearly 39 million, I said, still seated. "That kind of money can breed delusion." My phone buzzed on the table. Erin Riley. I remembered her promise to finish the inspection. "Erin, what did you find?" "Daniel, you need to hear this." Her voice carried an urgency that quickened my pulse. This wasn't mere tampering. This was attempted murder, executed at a professional level. Patricia glanced up, clearly catching enough of the call to grasp its weight. "Explain exactly," I said. "Your brake lines were cut with surgical precision," Erin replied. "Not random damage, not amateur work. The incisions are positioned to trigger complete brake failure after about 9 miles of highway driving." "Roughly 9 miles," Erin confirmed. "The same stretch from Newton to the expressway ramp downtown. At 70, your Lincoln would have turned coffin on wheels. No chance of survival." "Are you absolutely certain this was deliberate?" 100%. I've got photographs, measurements, everything documented. The tools used were professional grade. Whoever did this understood brake system vulnerabilities at a high level. Patricia leaned forward, legal instincts sparking. "Erin, this is Attorney Reynolds, counsel for Mr. Mercer. Would you be willing to provide expert testimony about your findings?" "Without hesitation. I've preserved all evidence and prepared a technical report. This wasn't amateur work. It had to be someone with either direct automotive knowledge or access to professionals willing to get their hands dirty. Given Clara's lifestyle, I'd say the latter is very likely." "There's more," Erin continued grimly. "The steering system was tampered with too. Even if the brakes hadn't failed, your Lincoln would have become increasingly unstable at highway speeds. Eventually, you'd have lost control." Patricia's pen flew across her legal pad, already framing the skeleton of a case. "This evidence will support criminal charges for attempted murder." "She killed my son," I said flatly, "and she tried to kill me. Now she pays for both." The final piece had clicked into place. Erin's expertise transformed suspicion into irrefutable proof. Combined with Andrew's written warning and Clara's volcanic reaction during the reading, we had enough to see her face justice. "I'll be contacting the Suffolk County District Attorney immediately," Patricia said, already reaching for her phone. Between inheritance fraud and attempted murder, Clara Mercer is facing very serious charges. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows over the scattered documents. Andrew's foresight had saved my life, preserved his fortune, and exposed the woman who had betrayed him. Clara's greed had finally collided with a father's love and a son's wisdom. Justice was no longer a hope, it was inevitable. The next morning, clarity arrived with the sunrise. With Andrew's estate secured, I could dedicate myself entirely to ensuring Clara faced the consequences she deserved. My home office became a war room, papers spread across every surface like exhibits in a trial to come. Patricia recommended an investigator, Linda Chen, 20 years of experience in financial crime. We met that afternoon in a quiet Boston cafe. Her sharp eyes, framed by dark-rimmed glasses, reflected a lifetime of watching greed corrode lives. "Mrs. Mercer has accumulated significant debt," Linda reported 3 days later, sliding a folder across my kitchen table. "Over $210,000 in the past year and a half. Luxury shopping, fine dining, designer brands, all while her husband was deteriorating." The records were damning. Clara had been drowning in debt, counting on Andrew's death to rescue her. On the 4th day, Dr. Michael Williams, a medical toxicologist Patricia had consulted, arrived with his analysis of Andrew's records. His voice was calm, but his words landed like hammer blows. The pattern of symptoms reads like a poisoner's handbook. Arsenic, slow accumulation, then organs collapsing in sequence, he explained, spreading the reports across my table. Every page of these labs screams arsenic. It builds, it lingers, and then it kills fast once the body breaks. Each revelation drove another nail into Clara's coffin. But the most incriminating evidence came from the neighborhood itself. Mrs. Patterson, 3 houses down, had a high-definition camera system covering the entire street. The footage was devastatingly clear. Clara's white Audi pulling up at 11:47 p.m. Her figure, tools flashing like knives under the streetlight, moving deliberately toward my garage. Camera 3 caught her crouched at your hood, the technician explained, pausing on the perfect frame. The clock doesn't lie, and neither does the lens. The resolution leaves no doubt who it is. By the 5th day, the case was complete. Motive, debt and greed. Means, poison and sabotage. Opportunity, unrestricted access to Andrew and to my property. Expert testimony, financial records, medical analysis, and security footage. Every piece fit together seamlessly. The crown jewel remained Erin's report. Professional sabotage designed to cause a fatal accident, preserved in photographs and technical schematics detailed enough to convince any jury. Clara had written her own sentence. All we had to do now was deliver it. That evening, I sat in my study, surrounded by folders. Clara's financial desperation, medical evidence of Andrew's poisoning, security footage of her sabotage attempt, and expert testimony tying every thread together. My phone buzzed. A message from Patricia. District Attorney wants to meet tomorrow. Bring everything. The gears of justice were finally turning. Clara had calculated every detail of her murderous scheme, except for one variable she never accounted for: a father's determination. Andrew's warning from beyond the grave had saved my life and unmasked his killer. Now it was time to ensure she paid in full. I gathered the files into my briefcase, preparing for what would be her last day of freedom. Clara's home stood in an affluent suburb just outside Boston, 20 minutes from downtown. A manicured lawn, pristine hedges, and a circular driveway showcased the lifestyle she'd been clawing to preserve. 2 luxury cars gleamed in the morning sun, her white Audi and a silver Lexus, both likely financed on credit she had no chance of repaying. I parked across the street, walked deliberately to her front door, and rang the bell. The manila envelope in my hand carried the weight of her downfall. Arrest warrants, civil lawsuit filings, and a comprehensive evidence summary. Clara appeared in an expensive silk robe, her dark hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. When she saw me standing there, the color drained from her face like water from shattered glass. "What do you want?" Her voice quivered, straining to sound indignant. "Official summons for attempted murder charges." I handed her the envelope with ceremonial precision. Also included are civil actions for inheritance fraud and emotional distress. She stared at the papers as though they were written in code. "You've got nothing. This is harassment dressed up as evidence. Video footage from 3 separate cameras shows you sabotaging my car. A certified automotive expert has documented the tampering. Medical testimony indicates arsenic poisoning. Financial records reveal over $210,000 in debt as your motive." Each fact landed like a blow. Clara clutched the doorframe for balance, her elegant facade collapsing before my eyes. "The district attorney has already accepted the case," I continued calmly. "The trial is scheduled for next month. I thought you deserved to hear it from me first." "I'll destroy you in court." She stepped forward, but her silk slippers slipped against the marble, turning the move pitiful rather than threatening. "You'll never prove I hurt Andrew. Dr. Michael Williams will testify about the arsenic. Linda Chen will present your financial records. Erin Riley will explain the professional sabotage on my Lincoln. The evidence doesn't whisper, Clara, it shouts. Clara's eyes darted across the neighborhood, perhaps wondering which of her wealthy neighbors might be watching her humiliation. The sun illuminated every line of panic etched into her face. You think you've won? Her voice pitched higher, almost breaking. I'll appeal. I'll drag this through court for years. You destroyed yourself, Clara. This only makes it official. She clutched the documents to her chest like armor, as though paper might shield her from truth. But both of us knew the reality. Her world was collapsing, and no silk dress or high-priced lawyer could rebuild it. Andrew warned me about you, I said quietly. I should have listened sooner. The door slammed with such force the glass panes rattled. Through the window, I caught sight of her sinking onto the marble floor, still gripping the papers that would send her to prison. I walked back to my car with measured steps, Andrew's presence steady on my shoulder. Justice was no longer an aspiration. It was a freight train already in motion, unstoppable and final. 3 weeks later, Judge Patricia Morrison delivered the verdict to a packed Boston courtroom. Clara Mercer, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in prison without possibility of parole for attempted murder and inheritance fraud. The gavel's final strike ended Clara's freedom and began true justice for Andrew's memory. Outside the courthouse, reporters surged forward, their questions a blur of noise. Justice has prevailed, I told the cameras. My son can finally rest in peace, knowing his killer has been held accountable. Clara's conviction made headlines across Massachusetts. The glamorous widow, unmasked as a poisoner and would-be murderer, became a grim parable of greed and its consequences. The once celebrated widow who poisoned her husband and tried to murder her father-in-law became a cautionary tale of greed's ultimate cost. Clara Mercer would spend the next 15 years in maximum security, her designer gowns exchanged for prison uniforms, her fine dining replaced with cafeteria trays. But my true satisfaction didn't come from watching her fall. It came from transforming Andrew's legacy into something that would outlive us all. 6 months after the trial, the Andrew Mercer Cancer Research Foundation was launched, funded entirely by the inheritance Clara had killed to obtain. Your $39 million donation will fuel groundbreaking research for decades, Dr. Elizabeth Hart announced during the foundation's opening ceremony. Lives will be saved because of your son's vision and your devotion to preserving it. Standing before an audience of researchers, doctors, and community leaders, I felt Andrew's presence stronger than ever. His brilliance, his drive, his spirit, they would live on through every discovery, every treatment, every patient given a second chance. I downsized to a modest home near Boston Harbor, keeping only what truly brought me peace. The rest of my energy went into the foundation. I traveled to research centers, met with patient families, and ensured Andrew's fortune built hope instead of destruction. Maggie Doyle still checked on me often. Our bond deepened by the night her vigilance saved my life. Erin Riley had become more than a mechanic. She was a trusted ally whose expertise exposed an attempted murder. Patricia Reynolds oversaw the legal structure of the foundation, guaranteeing that every dollar reached the right hands. Together, we had turned a story of greed into one of healing. 1 year after the trial, I visited Andrew's grave. A new research protocol, funded by the foundation, was showing promise of saving hundreds of lives each year. Son, I whispered to the granite marker etched with his name. I kept my promise. Your killer faced justice, and your legacy is saving others from the battle you couldn't win. What began in despair had blossomed into purpose. From loss, a legacy of hope. Clara's attempt to destroy our family had instead created something enduring and beautiful, a testament to love conquering greed, justice overcoming evil, and a father's determination to honor his son. The fortune she once coveted now fueled the very science that might have saved Andrew's life. In the end, it was the purest irony. The death she plotted had become life for countless others.